Thank you, Admiral. We are on time. It now devolves upon me to combine the valedictory address which should have been given by General V.K. Singh and as well as the interaction with the audience. Now, there is an old medieval saying that if a lady looks and concentrates on a gentleman long enough, the gentleman starts making the first move by speaking. So I will request you all to concentrate on this map, and you have been concentrating for the last 2 days on this map, and I'm sure the map has a story to tell to all of you. The map, if you have concentrated on it now for some time, it begs the question, who is better positioned? Is it China or is it India? None. The person who is better positioned is the person who plays its cards best. How do you play your cards best? By making friends on the fringes of either. So if you look at the map, there is Japan and Senkaku Islands on the north. You come down to Taiwan, thereafter you come down to Southeast Asian countries, then you come down to Straits of Malacca, then you come down further to the Andaman Nicobar Islands. And if you go further west, you come down to the Lakshadweep and Lakshadweep Islands, which are yet to be developed. Now, who is better positioned? So this is something, I mean, I am not a Navy man, but I am just saying that it is something to be thought. Also, the map tells you another story, that we live on a tough neighborhood. Somebody was talking about the neighborhood. India lives in a tough neighborhood. At the moment, you can't really separate China from Pakistan. If there is a threat from one, rest assured, the threat will be absolutely and exponentially also grown by the other. The fourth thing that the map tells you, that just disregard the land area and take the ocean areas, mass of oceans, and you see a different picture altogether. I am not counting sea route being opened by the Chinese across the Arctic now. Now, the other thing that I want to say, you see, wars are obsolete. Down the millennia, every neighbor has been coveting something of the other of its own neighbor. But when two neighbors are powerful enough, and in the Admiral's word, one doesn't like to, unnecessarily needle a neighbor because the losses are going to be unacceptable. Can we have the chairs also slowly, please? Chairs. Now, from here we come to the question of, if wars are obsolete, what do? You dissuade and you deter. These are the two main issues that power means, that you will be able to dissuade and deter the other guy from trying to needle you. However, what again flows from this, what does make a nation powerful? There's so many things. There's population, there's large area, strong military, a strong economy, and an advanced technology. These are the five basic issues which come to mind. China and India has at least two of them. Large area, although we are 1/3 in the size, a little more than 1/3. We have a large population. Nearly 1/3 of the world's population at the moment is over here in this area. But has the Indian system been able to harness its own strengths? The answer is a clear no. We haven't been, for various reasons. And perhaps The political system has been one of those reasons why India has not been able to harness its own strengths. Any country to be powerful needs a strong military and it needs a strong economy. Without either, you cannot be called strong. You see all the way the three so-called, the three major nations which were there. Russians had a strong military, they were a power. But they did not have a strong economy, they faded. US, on its path to strong power, first built up an economy, then they built up a military. China is cleverer. They built or they are building both concurrently, the military as well as its economy. Having said all this, I must also add that the Chinaman who most look 7 feet tall, but I can assure you they're certainly not 10 foot tall. So we need to start thinking of them as such, that we are equal to them, start cooperating with them, maybe even compete. And as General Roy Chaudhary said, if required, confront. I am a military man. I am not a great believer. I am sure all the ambassadors and their excellencies will disagree with me over here. I am not much of a person with, cultural and educational and other exchanges. So they certainly do help. But when it comes to power play, it is just two, economy and military. That is all that matters. We are of this size, we have such captive markets, both the nations, that I heard the word yesterday, trying to isolate, and the other was trying to weaken. I don't think it is possible to either weaken or isolate each other, because they will grow within themselves, because they have, India has the wherewithal with its own market. It really doesn't have to look outside, but we need to improve our systems. India is going to be at a greater advantage in the next few years, we're going to have a burgeoning middle class. We showed you some graphs which Mr. Mohan Guruswamy sent, and I tried to interpret them. I hope I interpreted them correctly. Now, Ambassador Sinha is not over here, and somebody else talked about the billions of dollars which we have. I would like to know, India also has got $400 billion plus. But what have we done? Have we optimally used it? No. We have sent $200 billion to USA, putting in their banks, earning 1 to 1.5% interest. I think it could have been better managed, better used to manage our immediate neighbors. It's a very small thing, but if you can't manage your own neighbors, how are we going to manage the neighbors' neighbors further on? There are a few cliches now that I would like to add. I heard a speaker saying, hope for the best. No, please don't hope for the best. Please prepare for the worst. That should be the byline. US is protected, great, by two large oceans on either side. It doesn't really have to worry about its own safety at the present moment until there is missiles flying all over the world. But in our case, we have neighbors who can challenge us. So there is a need to worry. And I would say that a nation which is strong enough and which is, intelligent enough must not depend on another nation's assistance to help it out. You have to be, as the Admiral said, only strength begets strength and power. The last food for thought is, just start thinking as, except for a few nations in this world, who are China's friends? what comes to my mind is Pakistan, North Korea, maybe some underdeveloped nation in Africa. Who else? And I think we have a lot of other goodwill in this thing. Just for your information, in January, and I'm sure Ambassador, His Excellency Asari is going to back me on that. The Senkaku Islands was again tried to be engaged by the Chinese, one by a submarine and another by a frigate, on January 18th, if I'm not mistaken. So see the comparison. Senkaku Islands, Dokla. So one has to stand fast against it if it is to get it. The audience is free to ask queries. Please say your name. Please take the name of the speaker you want to address. We have precisely 15 minutes.
Now that the clock was stopped while you spoke, I just want to tell the audience to give a applaud to the two speakers that
Yes.
Yeah, very short. I really congratulate General Mukherjee and General Roy for such an excellent speeches. I wish I could bring more students. I am Shokta Bhattacharya of Calcutta University, served 32 years and have recently been felicitated for my lifetime achievement to teach Southeast Asia. And some of my queries, 2-3 minutes I would need. First of all, I would like to bring one question to Greg, who knows my works also. It's also widely known in Southeast Asia, that these countries which are now under the umbrella of ASEAN, I am actually teaching also decolonization period. This is, I'm still teaching, every individual country had tremendous potential in everything. And now it is time that we take a view of that. And this may somehow neutralize many things. And as for United States, I would like to see the old Cornell School and again, and it is coming up also, 50s. And for the Japanese, I would like to ask one question, and with that I will stop. That we have not heard much about Myanmar. Actually, I have written 80 articles and 4 books on Myanmar, and I'm happy that many of you know my work. You have told us about your engagement with Bangladesh. What about Myanmar infrastructure development? Because Myanmar, along with West Germany, or today Germany, where I was also groomed as a specialist, so also by Shantiniketan specialist. I wanted to say that, do you think that this old Germany, Japan, two important partners will come back, which was during the time of Navy? Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all of you.
So Craig, while you answer her first query, I would request you to also answer the queries which were raised by Dr. Kondapalli. Not that they are connected, but we could take this opportunity.
Okay, and I'll do it at the risk of misunderstanding, I'll do it very briefly because time is very short. But Professor Kondapalli did have some good questions. So frankly and shortly, I'd say the myth or the narrative of U.S. retreat from Asia is a myth. It's a false narrative, propagated knowingly, intentionally by some actors who would like to see the U.S. retreat from Asia. But then there are other actors who aren't propagating that narrative intentionally falsely, but have a misunderstanding. And I think it would be true to say that relative to other powers in Asia, the U.S. presence in Asia is decreasing, but not in absolute terms. And China's power is increasing, and America's power in the region is not increasing as quickly. India's power in the region is increasing. So relatively speaking, America's power is increasing. But I don't think you can point to any action that would support the idea that America's power is decreasing. Because America withdrew from the TPP doesn't mean that America is disengaging from the region. It means that there was a consensus in the United States that it was a bad deal. India didn't even consider the TPP. It doesn't mean that India is withdrawing from Asia. It just means that it didn't fit India. But by every measure, business, military, alliances, otherwise, the U.S. is still there and growing. The question on the G2, whether or not the U.S. would settle for a G2 with China, I would say is absolutely antithetical to the U.S. vision for the region. More is better, and the U.S. has taken a decision and has recently begun to articulate it, that we won't sacrifice that vision for a larger community to the fear of publicly criticizing China. So China cannot hold us, any of us, hostage to the vision of a larger community that gives all of us the benefit of prosperity. How to manage China, and related to the question of the Quad, I think comes to in the U.S. mind, the importance of alliances. I agree with General Roy. We all should each be as strong as we can independently, but I think we also have to recognize that none of us alone can manage the situation. We rely on each other, and the Quad in that regard is important, but it's just getting started. I think because we're collectively slow to either realize or accept that China is acting very strategically in a very concerted manner in a way that threatens our interests. For whatever reason, historical, cultural, whatever, we're reluctant to respond in kind. But I think the Quad, the idea of the Quad is an example that collectively we're having that idea and taking that action.
Thank you, Ted.
I think, yeah, the question about Myanmar. Yes, well, we have, as you know, very close relationship with Myanmar. We've been helping Myanmar's development, and we are committed to Myanmar's development and also development of its democracy. Foreign Minister Kono visited Myanmar in January, and he stated, renewed this commitment of the Japanese government. And as regards to your another question regarding the infrastructure, yes, we've been involved in various projects as a partly as a part of East-West corridor across the ASEAN region. And other projects include things like development of Dawei Port or the port and economic zone development in the vicinity of Yangon. And just one thing about the Quad, yes.
Yes, please.
I would like to emphasize that this isn't really, press wants tend to like to portray this as a kind of something which is directed to China, but it's not really the vehicle to address our relation with China. This is the Quad is really we take this as in a more broader perspective and context of for like-minded countries with the capacity and will to work on and strengthening rule-based order in the Pacific. So we take it more in a broader perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ambassador Ong, you were asked certain queries by Dr. Kondapalli during the session. Could you answer him, those queries, and then we can go ahead, move ahead?
I thought I'd answered it. Yeah, I given my answer already. But the basic point here is that, as you said, don't just hope for the best, be prepared.
Thank you. Well, since I think came about Quad, I would just like to inform the audience here, this is not the first time that Quad has come about. This is actually Quad 2.0. But earlier, it was more of a loose sort of a meaning, and this is yet to crystallize actually what is going to happen. Anyway, any other queries? Yes, Harish.
You know, I think that many of you have been in direct negotiations with the Chinese, either on treaties or in bilateral talks. How do you find their negotiating style? We've been reading about a certain arrogance in their behavior. As Henry Kissinger said, it is not just the hard negotiations that matter, it's the atmospherics. So at these negotiations, do they come across as amicable partners? Do they lecture, hector, abuse? That's one thing. And the second point is about the beatings up of certain newsmen accompanying world leaders to China. They've been attacked by Chinese guards on reporters, I think from the United States and I think from some other countries. In some other countries, there are reports of Chinese officials thugging and pushing in order to get their way, when they were prevented from doing certain things that they wanted to do in terms of protocol, and there was pushing and shoving happening. So this arrogance that has been appearing in the media about the Chinese behavior, have you seen this rising along with arrogance rising with China's growing power?
Ambassador Ong and Mr. Political.
Well, the Chinese have a certain way of negotiating, yeah, and sometimes it's not easy to get along with their style of discussion and talking to other countries. But they are getting a bit more sophisticated these days. At least for one thing, they all learn to speak English and don't speak Mandarin and get interpreter to work on it so that they have more time to ponder your responses. So I think the important thing about the Chinese style is that they come from a standpoint of 5,000 years of history, which most of us in modern era, most of our nationhood, India of course is an exception, Japan I suppose has also a very long history, but for us in Southeast Asia they tend to think that most of us are just 100 years old, and therefore the long civilizational dimension of China would be more instructive than what we in ASEAN can offer. But it varies from individual to individual. Some of their leaders and some of their officials are quite classic, but some of them are very much more innovative. The more important thing is the desire to find a way. The style may be different, but I think if we all share a common purpose, and like the Chinese say, we should have mutual respect, mutual fairness, I think it will help. Yeah. There will be a disagreement from time to time, but eventually to achieve some tangible results in negotiation, you have to give and take.
Okay.
Just quickly about how to deal with our relation with China in general. I could just summarize in the way I said in my presentation in terms of foreign minister's statement that we are willing to develop constructive cooperative relations with China, but of course at the same time we will keep our principal position. And keeping principal position is very important, especially when we are speaking to Chinese friends.
Mr. Siddharth Sharma.
I could resist myself with such a distinguished panel here. I thought I'd ask one question, maybe two. And anybody can answer. And it's around Mr. Prem Hall. Do you foresee any possibility, as political or social changes in China, which will be very, very relevant as far as security is concerned? This is my first question. And the second question is, I just said that there are no permanent friends and no permanent enemies. And with China emerging as a major power, military power, economic power, and there are threats, Chinese threats. And in that context, is there any possibility of America and Russian Federation coming closer politically? These are the two questions I wanted to ask.
Who would like to take this one? I think, Craig, this is right down your...
About China, I can't speak. But about U.S. and Russia, I mean, right now there are serious differences between U.S. and Russia. The primary one I think most people forget these days is Russia's invasion of Ukraine and occupation of Crimea and continued assault on eastern Ukraine. And I think until that's resolved, doing any more with Russia would be difficult. China, I don't know. I can't speak about China.
Dr. Srikant Kondapalli, you have a query.
A few years ago, Japan's foreign minister mentioned about the McMahon line, about the Arunachal Pradesh belonging to India. And last year, when the Doklam incident took place, Japan's ambassador was one of the foremost persons to come forward and said that status quo should be maintained and that the issue has to be resolved peacefully. Now, so these are very music to the ears of India on Arunachal Pradesh as well as on Doklam issue. I was surprised in your speech. You mentioned that India-China border is about 2,000 kilometers. This is a Chinese version. I'm not sure whether Japan has gone into this issue of whether it is 2,000 kilometers. In the Indian official statement, it is 3,488 kilometers. So what is the difference between the Japanese version of 2,000 kilometers?
Let me check again, because maybe I was given a wrong brief. I didn't have any intention of a particular, getting myself involved in the particular dispute. So let me check again. Maybe my brief may contain wrong figure. But speaking of Ambassador Hiramatsu's statement, this is actually a long-held view, the principled position, not really limited to particular dispute, but there should be no change of unilateral change of status quo by force or coercion, and dispute must be resolved peacefully. This applies to not only a particular area, but anywhere, either be it on land or be it on maritime dispute. So this, I think, he was able to articulate our principled position on this, and we very much adhere to keeping up this principle and rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sari. Now, before we end the session and the day just before lunch, I've got small 2 points. The thing is, one must know that when you're negotiating with the Chinese, and I have done a couple of them, at our level, at my level, they will say yes to everything, but you must also remember that they are basically revisionists. They may not abide by what they have agreed to, and as we see over a long history, they have actually not abided by various treaties. A. B. On the same hand, I mean, notwithstanding, on these couple of trips to China that I saw, I wanted to see Great Wall of China, so I went along, and you won't believe, as somebody talked about, Harish talked about arrogance and the way they behave. There were 2 guys in front of me just pushing off people off the road. And in one of the cities in Shanghai, they stopped the whole traffic so that my car could take a U-turn and go to the wrong side of the road. So, I suppose it's a system which works and which not works. Now, at the end of it all the panelists are over here. I think we had a very useful 2-day session. As soon as the photographs and the other things keep coming, we'll be trying and sending it to you all. And we have noted the presentations which were given. They will be held by us. And those who have not given their presentation, if you could have a small little paper, it will help us, although we will try and transcribe something out of these talks. And please, ladies and gentlemen, give the entire panelists a standing ovation. Thank you very much.